Welcome everyone to our Special Board of Education meeting on our budget workshop number 1. If you please stand for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so from our last meeting, we made it all the way up to tab number 7, which takes us to staff summary. Were there any follow-up questions from board members? I don't see any audience participation, so
That's always positive.
we won't need to go there. Unless we have some administration that has some questions they would like to share.
I have a couple of comments I would like to share. There are two packets that were placed in front of you tonight for replacement in Section 4 and in Section 9, just to clean up some of the language around the variances, et cetera. The numbers did not change, but there, I think a little more clarity was added to some of the variances. And also, we took a look at, the question came up the other day about world languages and at what grade level, and so we assembled some actual data from around the state, and I'd just like to let you know that there are, well, let me just read down the list. Avon starts in K, grade K. Brookfield is in K, Glastonbury is in first grade, Greenwich is in K, Region 5 is in first grade, Region 10 is third, West Hartford is third, Fairfield is fourth, Madison is fourth, Farmington is fifth, Granbury, Guilford, and Simsbury is grade 5, New Fairfield and Trumbull and Region 15 is in sixth grade, and everyone else is 7th or above in the state. So, you know, with 169 towns, you know, there's a fairly small number that really provide that instruction below grade 6. So I just wanted to make sure you had that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's start with the staff summary here. Jim, or did you have somebody that was going to?
Yes.
On tab 7.
No, I did not. John and Gabby, if you want to come up and take the mic in case I can't answer a question there, but I think I could speak to most of these fairly confidently. You'll notice that they're arranged by school and then a grand summary of page. So the first one is Fawn Hollow. And of note there, if you look at grade 5 in fiscal year 15, the middle column, you show 5 certified staff. In the third column, fiscal year 16, you see 4. That's that reduction of 1 that we talked about yesterday, or on Monday, I'm sorry, due to the enrollment decrease.
So that, I'm just quickly with the calculator, so with 4 sections of 5th grade and 85 students projected, that looks like at Fawn Hollow, 21.5 is the 5th grade class size.
Right.
So
Yeah,
seems
it's good.
reasonable.
Yeah. The other change in staffing at Fawn Hollow, you'll see that far to the right-hand side in the custodial, we're realigning. It's not a cut in a position; it's a realignment of staff from one building to another, a split staff. At Monroe Elementary School on the second page, 7.3, I believe that is. I'm sorry. No, 7.2 up above. Preschool. You see no changes recommended at this time there. I mean, that's something that's a bit of a wild card out there, as we know more as the year goes on. In Monroe Elementary School, you'll see that there's no changes in staffing recommended there. At Stepney, on page 7.4, no changes in staffing. On page 5 at Jockey Hollow, you'll notice the secretarial full-time on the far right corner, second line down, we have a reduction of secretarial full-time by 1 position.
And that's where that custodian changed.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, the custodian changed there too.
That's
I have a question about Stone Elementary.
Yep.
We have a librarian at Monroe L, and we have the media specialist at all 3. So there's 1 librarian. Was there still?
Wait, that should be, yeah, all 3 elementary schools are now library media specialists.
But we still have 1 librarian at Monroe L.
No, we have a librarian at Massac and a librarian at Jockey Hollow.
So that should,
First time, right,
so that should say media specialist, not librarian.
correct.
No, it should
I'm sorry.
say 0.
It should be 0.
It should be 0.
On the non-certified staff, on the certified staff, we have a library media specialist at Monroe L. The librarian who's non-certified should be removed and should really be up here at Massac.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay.
So that should be a 0 then for
Yeah,
next
and
year.
that would just be a shift between Massac and
Jockey.
Jockey Hollow.
So then up here at the high school, it should be read 2 librarians?
Well, we're saying 1 is at STEM. So at the Jockey Hollow one, it should say librarian 1, and at Massac, it should say non-certified librarian 1. If you went to 7.5 and you wrote in librarian on the non-certified side for Jockey Hollow, you could put 1 there.
So Jockey Hollow also only has a media specialist and not a librarian. So we just have 1 librarian left?
2.
2.
1 at Massac and 1 here for STEM.
STEM.
Okay.
So at Jockey Hollow, the change is a reduction of a full-time secretary, but the addition of some custodial time, so a net change of 0.75 FTE there. Massac is a little bit more complicated, okay? And this is, you know, this is what's in the budget, but, you know, there may need to be some flexibility, not in the number of staff changes, but in how we do it, depending on retirements and how we can utilize best certification areas. All right, so going down the list, language arts reading, you'll notice that there's a reduction of staff of a 0.6 there. Now, what happens in that situation is that it's likely that a current 0.6 is made whole, and so we're moving people around, but the net change is a 0.6 down. Mathematics, the same thing, and a minus 0.6. Science, a 1.0. Social studies, a 0.8. CTE is down 0.2, and special education is down a full position.
Mark, it didn't shut off.
What's CTE, Jim?
Technology, career technology.
Education, the business department, the computers, home ec, I'm sorry. Culinary arts. Showing my age.
Enrollment is running a little bit low there, okay? And so we're going to cut basically 0.2 of a position there and migrate that position. Actually shows up in a social studies area, okay? So you see the reduction of a 0.8 there? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I got you.
It seems like we used to get, or previous years, the number of students per class and how the reduction of staff affected the classroom sizes for these particular courses of study. I'm just curious. I know we were losing 3.2 from Massac. Do we know what the effect is on the high school? for that?
Well, if you look at the enrollment change in the second column, you can see that freshmen, there are 56 less freshmen next year than there are this year. So when you look at the cut in language arts and reading, it would be a freshman class. Because there's so many, it would come out of the freshman class because there's so many less kids next year than there are this year.
So that's a required class then for
Those are
freshmen.
required classes, but there are 56 less students next year in freshman class taking language arts than there are this year.
So is that the only class?
No.
No, then you look at,
No.
you can look
No,
at
I
the
mean
senior
the-
class, there's 47 less kids in senior class, so the senior, it might be, you could take that 1.0, that 0.6 language arts and reading. 2 classes might be in freshman year, and 2 classes might be and 1 class might be in the senior year. It depends on that. Now, we always wait until enrollment happens in the classes to see exactly how this all pans out.
Right, they don't begin registering, the course catalogs go out, registration starts really in January, and then progresses for a period of months, really, because there's adds and drops and conflicts to resolve and schedules, et cetera. So it's usually not until close to the end of June that we actually have, our courses, our classes actually filled, where we can generate a report that's reliable about what the enrollment is for the next year.
The principal can look at these reductions and know from past, what classes they would be. That's why these are kind of an estimate. If we cut a 0.4 English, we could cover all the classes and still not increase the class size.
And that's basically what Joe and I did, in September and October of this year, is going through through this year's class enrollments and looking for weak spots where enrollment was low and trying to figure, okay, I think we could eliminate 1 class here just based on, the projected enrollment for next year.
If I can speak to that, I know we're kind of just looking at a numbers game right now, but a couple of weeks ago we got presented with all of the, the test scores and the DIRG, and our SAT scores were a real concern. They were really low compared to the rest of our DIRG. And I know we have a significant enrollment decline happening at Massac, but what are we doing to address that in light of we're going to be losing 3.2 staff members? How are we going to be able to address those concerns with the test scores?
I don't know how best to answer that, and I wish Joe is actually doing his
I know.
His open house tonight for the 8th grade to enter. But the fixes that we have projected in place for the SAT, okay, are not class size dependent. It's more curriculum dependent and how we address that, okay? We're not expecting class sizes to go up at all with these reductions, okay? What we're trying to do is orchestrate, fine tune it so that we can maintain our current class sizes here at the high school and count on these reductions that you see, in freshman and senior year in particular.
So are you thinking of addressing it more on a, you said curriculum, like through professional development and other strategies, working with our existing staff?
John, you put the book
Resource.
together that has
Right.
the strategies in it, so why don't you speak to that?
It would be like using resource materials that better match what the kinds of types of questions that are happening in the SAT. And remember, the SAT is
It's about to
changing,
change.
so that's one of the things that the secondary instructional leaders are doing. They're spending some time looking and see what those changes are, so that they can incorporate them into the classroom. I mean, there was a discussion with Joe about some of the reading intervention that's happening at the high school, and he talks a lot about how that reading intervention really that teacher and that support go into classrooms and really work on those kind of skills, SATs and CAP and things like that. So, that wasn't touched in this. What was touched was the least evasive kind of cuts, so that it didn't affect the support. It affected class sizes if the classes were the same, but since we're losing kids, we figured the class sizes wouldn't be any different. So they're really looking at resource materials, they're looking at how they're teaching, make sure it matches what it's asking, the kids are asking. Because if you just teach a couple of weeks to the test, it's not going to work. It's got to be embedded in the curriculum, and it's part of our maps now.
And the special ed reduction at the high school, can you speak to that a little bit?
It wasn't going to be, right now it's coming from the high school, but there will be opportunities, we talked about it today, opportunities. It might not be a whole cut from the high school depending on what the IEP say, so it might be part high school, maybe part another school, but we feel through Kay, and maybe she can talk about it when she comes up here, we feel that there is some room to do that based on enrollment in some of our programs at the high school, maybe STEM and Jackie Hollow.
Yeah, I mean, the staffing is a projection, really, at this time. I mean, I'm fairly confident, I'm more than fairly confident. I am confident that we can maintain and improve our programming with this reduction in staff that's proposed here.
Okay.
Anything else on staffing? Alan?
It's not really a staffing question, but I remember a few years back, John, I'm sure you obviously remember there was a problem with science labs. There wasn't enough equipment, or they weren't able to hold X amount of kids.
Right, we didn't
Has
have.
that been resolved?
Yes, that has been resolved, and that really happened over the years as less and less kids are at Massive. We've lost a lot of kids over the years. So when we started, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we just started to institute the biology labs because we didn't have that. And that caused an overload of classes, and that's what you're talking about. And so through attrition, we haven't really cut those teachers because we wanted to keep those sizes small, and we were sharing labs with teachers, and it really wasn't working out well. But now over the years, we've lost over a couple hundred kids at the high school, so those labs kind of evened out, and now they're able to have those, and it's working very well now.
And in terms of the equipment, it's up to date, it's fine.
Yeah, I think, they're always looking for new technologies to do their labs, and I know they've been working really closely, Jim Stozel's been working really closely with Jack Zamry on getting updated lab equipment, especially in the technology area. But haven't had any issues as far as the general labs and things that are going on in the science equipment. That hasn't been a problem. But technology is always something they're looking for. Different, as the probes change and things that they use with the computer. And I know he's been working really closely with Jack Zamry to see if they can get new technology.
And the summary of the entire district is on 710 and 711. And you can see the certified change is a 5.2 and the non-certified change is a 2.0. And as I said at the beginning of the budget process on Monday evening, if we get any additional retirements and we can backfill those positions with less expensive teachers, we may experience some savings with those. We'll know that at the end of December, but certainly in time for the board to adopt a budget in early January.
Okay. On to enrollment summary, tab 8.
We've referenced this a number of times. The Prouder report in here is running about 40 students lower than what we actually have, but we still are estimating a decrease of 144 students from this year to next year. So that the charts that in the executive summary show that steady decline.
I just have a quick question about when we approved the special ed position this year for Monroe L.
For the preschool, yes.
Right. What's happening to that?
That is not budgeted at this time for next year.
Okay.
Okay. We don't anticipate that problem will exist next year.
Some of those kids will move on to kindergarten.
Right.
And that number will go back down.
Can another situation like that arise and I come back to the board for additional support there? Absolutely. So special education, tab 9. There are some quirky things in tab 9 as we work through some of the variances today, trying to better understand some of the variances. One of the things that came out in our discussion, and it was Gabby, John, Kay, Andrea, myself, we spent a couple of hours looking at this. There are areas in this section that are true-ups, okay? And it's pulling in some staffing into Kay's category that may not really be Kay's people, okay? I can assure you all that all of our staffing counts and salary accounts and that are accurate in total, but they may not be allocated appropriately in this section 100%. Once we have an adopted budget after the referendum, you know how I bring back to you the approved budget and any modifications for your final adoption? When we bring that forward to you, we are going to be absolutely certain that every bean is in exactly the right place. And so it'll deviate from some of the reports that you have in front of you right now. But it's just the way munis and payroll gets pulled into the system, and people that may be counted in K's count may not actually be K's person. Okay? Does that make sense? If you need clarification, let me try that again. Okay? Do we have a specific example that I can point to?
How about the aides?
The aides.
751129 on page 9-1.
On 9.1 or 9.4?
9.4.
Let's go to 9.4, 751129, aides, regular, and special ed. Okay? Right off the bat, the name of the line is wrong. Okay? Because regular ed should not be in K's budget. Okay? But speak to this line, whoever, one of you.
What happened was, every school, so when you go through the school's budget, you'll see there's a line for aides. And that's where all the aides were put, except for Monroe Elementary School. Monroe Elementary School was put into K's budget under special ed. And that's an issue with Munis and how we set up Munis. Remember, this is only our second year with Munis, so we're working on that. Preschool should have been in here, but not Monroe Elementary School. So now both of them are, now Monroe Elementary School and preschool are put in K's budget, and it shouldn't be.
And we think it's because preschool is located.
Right, the site is coming up the same, and so people are getting pulled in by the site code into this budget. So we know what the problem is, and there's nothing wrong with the aggregate numbers, okay? But to make it truly reflective of the site and the cost center, we need to true this up, okay? And we will have that fixed by the time, actually we'll have it ready to be fixed by February, and we'll fix it when you adopt the final budget in April.
And Jim, just to illustrate that if I can, if you look at that 751129, you see it says a 35.56% increase. That's a little bit of a lot of increase. But if you look on the budget for the district on page 6.8, section 6.8, you'll see that district-wide, the paraprofessionals are only up 1.89.
See, so it's pulling in people.
So it's really just an allocation of where our bodies are. So basically what happened is when we budgeted last year, we probably didn't budget all the bodies in the right place. We've had people move around in the current year. The budget gets built off of where they were originally in the year. It doesn't necessarily capture where they are because we sort of have to pick a point in time. So we pick a point in time and it may not be, somebody might not be in the right building, or they might not be in the right place in the building, or we might just not have gotten a piece of paper that said, oh, they're really not in preschool, they're really in first grade. So
Right, and a good example is with the preschool issue this year, we realigned the staff member, okay? So next year, that person is now coded for preschool, okay? It'll be off next year, Because in this current budget operating year, that person was not in that preschool position. You see what I'm saying? So that's where some of these variances are coming from in here. But ask away.
So your best estimate then, based on that, would be that special ed's numbers are, roughly around the 2% that's reflected in the whole district-wide aids? Okay.
Correct.
Can I ask a question about transportation? Line item 755100, it's down $82,240. This comes up with the same thing I was talking about on Monday. Special education buses, are they the bigger buses or the smaller buses?
We have both. We have big buses and
Are
little
we
buses.
paying the same rate for the smaller buses as we do the big buses?
Yes, except for.
Why?
That's the way the contract is.
Okay, so that should be another
Right.
thing that, I mean, I understand we have a person driving a bus, and that's fine, I get that, but just smaller bus, less gas, less,
Well, it depends, is it in our best interest or not? I mean, do we
Well, I
pay
mean,
less
it's-
because we
is
have
that a
bigger
bargaining
buses
chip
or
when we
little
go for
buses?
renegotiations in 2 years?
We've actually the smaller buses are called type 2 buses. We've actually paid the same rate for type 2 buses as for type 1 buses, even before we had All-Star. That's the same rate we paid even back in the first student days. I can't tell you about Laidlaw because I wasn't.
But gas isn't part of that.
Gas isn't part of the equation.
Isn't part of that cost, because we pay for the gas.
Yeah, we
But
actually
the bottom line is that if you bring on smaller buses, it could affect your fleet for where the big buses are needed. In other words, you may need extra buses to run small buses for these runs.
Well, this is what I'm asking.
And that's
So
why,
these-
right.
Yeah, I need to know,
In
the
the
balance, there's a
Right.
balance to everything. This
Yeah.
whole budget works on the balance, and it all has to balance out, and
I mean, we also
get
use
that.
some of the smaller buses on our regular education runs. So you might have a small bus used for special ed during the Massic run, but then it's used for regular ed in a location of town where you're only picking up, 15 kids or something, and it's used for Jockey Hollow and for, say, Stepney.
Okay.
So they're intermingled, and we try to actually, when it comes to transportation, we actually try to break out the budget based on the 6 tiers, which is the three morning tiers and the 3 afternoon tiers, and we try to allocate out, this bus is run for special ed in the morning, then it's run, for 4 times for regular ed, and then it's run for special ed, and we try, then we say this one goes to Henry Abbott Tech, which is considered regular ed, and this one goes to Reach, and this one goes to Aqua. So we do actually try to really figure out where the buses are going and how much it's going to cost us.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add something to that? Also in that line, we, under special ed, we've looked for alternative ways to transport students because that was very high. We have a taxi service, to sort of say, so we have 3 taxis. A taxi day is only $180, and because they're often only transporting 1 child, we take that route versus buying a bus for the day to do the outplaced run.
Thank you.
I have another question on that.
Yeah.
I see a lot of these vans with school district names on them throughout the state on all the different highways. Are there any opportunities for us to use the smaller vans? They've got to cost less, they've got to use less gas, diesel. Do we have any of those? I mean, how come everybody else has them? I haven't seen them.
I have 1 van that we have in special ed. I'm not sure how many the district has.
The district overall has 2 of these 2 vans that, say, carrying school children on them, and they actually use regular unleaded gas as opposed to diesel.
And could we be using more of those?
It depends on the population, so it really depends on how many children, where they're going. So that's an annual review, really during the summer, when we talk to the bus company to see, what we need. I mean, Kay's numbers could change. She might have somebody who suddenly has to go to someplace in eastern Connecticut where we've never sent a child, and maybe we can actually hook up with a town. We do that. We've ride-shared with Trumbull. We've ride-shared with Stratford, Newtown in the past. So we do try to find alternate ways all the time.
Yeah,
So do we
we
need more
piggyback.
flexibility in our bus contract the next time around?
to allow for more?
The van, Mark, I mean, the van itself is still $275 a day. So I'm only saving like 40-some dollars by a van not having the bus.
okay.
I mean, you could look into it, but it's still a high cost.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I think what's important is what Gabby said, is that anytime we have the opportunity to join forces with another district, if we're sending up a kid to the American School for the Deaf, and so is Newtown, and so is Southbury, and so is Middlebury, we'll do a chain, one bus, and all the districts will share the cost of the run.
Alan?
Can you explain extra work certified?
What number?
751310.
Thank you.
It's, that's the summer school work?
Summers. Isn't it summer school
Yeah, it's the summer school salaries. So our teachers are paid their salaries from, August 22nd through June 30th. So then the work in the summer is considered extra work. That's not part of their regular salary agreement. So that would be extra work certified.
And maybe just a minute on the big elephant on the table, or moose on the table, what's the expression?
Which, the professional educational services or the other professional services?
Yeah,
Which elephant are you referring
Tuition
to?
within the state.
Oh, the tuition. Public tuition and private tuition, as I said the other night, they kind of flip back and forth. It depends on the needs of the students. Currently in public, we're servicing 12 students. And some of those are students that are aging out from 18 to 24. So it's a transition program that we don't provide in district. And private tuition is currently 11 students. So.
Thank you. Anything else on special ed? Helen?
Do any of your people that work for you use report writing software?
We do our own reports and then put it into the document repository in IAP Direct. So they write their own
I
report.
remember when your predecessor was here, she was buying that software that writes reports for you, punch the numbers in, and it spits out a...
All of the psychologists write their own reports. They have their own template, but it's not a form.
What about special ed teachers?
They write their own reports.
As long as everything's down there.
Okay, let's go on to revenue. So, anything that you want to explain on the revenue side, or any big
I think this
changes?
ties back to the last professional development we had that really talked about the grants.
Right, I mean, Kay, maybe you shouldn't disappear so fast, and Andrea, maybe you shouldn't disappear so fast. If we look at the excess cost, for instance, the special education excess cost grant, you see that that's up $287,000. Kay, do you want to just give a quick overview of that? Again, remember that the excess cost grant is based on a formula that when we exceed 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure.
Right, if you look at 9.6, is that where everyone's, if you go back to 9.6, those are the students that excess cost qualifies for, so the tuition and all of their services are in that first chart, and then it subtotals it. The 4.5, the threshold is that 67,795. So anything over that is what the excess cost we get back in.
And we estimate a 70% payout back from the state, which is based on where it's been historically over the past several years.
It's supposed to be 100%, but we always expect 70%, and that's about what you get.
And the one difference you'll see that doesn't say 67,795 is because that's a DCF placement, and that's 1 times per pupil expenditure we get in return.
Going back to the state grants and everything, knowing that we don't know what we're going to be getting for a little while, has there been any type of buzz that you've been hearing from other sources at all of where they're looking to be this year?
I'm hearing everything should be fairly stable.
Okay. That's good then.
Yep.
Can you go into the IDA EA Part B? That's about $182,000 difference that we're anticipating less.
That's what they gave us back. We do the grant the previous year, and it's due by May, but they don't tell us what our final total is until September. So what I normally do is base that grant on what we received previously, because that's always been the case, of we've always gotten that or more, but in this case, that was not the case. They reduced the number.
Okay.
And you said that exact same thing last year. I think I remember it.
That's what happens. That's how I do it.
Anything else on revenue?
So can I just so that, you know, if I'm asked this question, I can explain it. I need to understand it so I can explain it. The increase in our excess cost grant is because our costs have increased as well. So we're getting more money because we're spending more money to educate those kids.
Correct.
Right. Amy, if you look on that page 9-6, those rows are all individual situations. Okay, so Kay goes through this very painstakingly and mapping out, you know, this child is going to cost this much that year, and calculates in what that excess cost grant is going to be.
And I have to say, my secretary does it painstakingly. I give it a lot, but she does the bulk of the work.
And these are this year's costs, so, you know, that's what we're estimating to get back this year, and that's what we're using as our budget placeholder for next year. So if you go back to the revenue page, you can see in the 14-15 budget, we actually estimated we were going to get $666,000 back for this current year based on the population we had last year at this time. But and the reality is this year we're going to get the $900,000 back. Next year we're really not quite sure what we're going to get back. But if we have the exact same children with pretty much the same transportation, the same everything, that's what we potentially get back.
And just so you know, Amy, we have to do the excess cost grant to the state by December 1st. So these are actual numbers from this year. If there are students we anticipate may come to that threshold by the remainder of the year, we do put it into the state that it's a placeholder, but we don't put it on the form, nor do we put it in the actual grant. But the state's aware we may have more children that may meet that threshold as the year goes on.
Do they ever, in turn, then give us a little extra?
In March, we have to redo it and make sure that all of this has stayed the same, and if there's anything else, we can add to it at that point. But they had to be made aware of it by the December 1st date. We can't just add somebody later in the year.
Okay.
For tuition, these are the tuition rates based now. Could these change? Meaning, could we see in some of these tuitions a huge increase that's going to throw this off? Like
Not for this year. These are the actual tuitions for
but for next year, because we're basing this on an estimate. Could we see a 10% increase in a tuition?
We've not normally historically seen 10%. The highest one I've ever seen was a 7%, and that's even high. Usually there are 2 to 3%.
Okay, great.
And certain places have maintained their tuitions over the past several years, and they've been very consistent.
Lee?
Can you help me understand the $360,000 tuition? What does that comprise? What are obviously there's a big differential between that and $49,000. But what are the services that child might potentially be getting?
We have to be careful because we have to be very careful of FERPA here.
Right?
It is a 12-month year-round program.
Okay.
Includes everything.
Okay. On to 5-year capital needs. Jason, we went over this in pretty good detail on Monday, though. Were there any follow-up questions? On the capital?
And as I said, this will likely have to be revisited once the Fletcher-Thompson facility study is fully completed. Something may pop up in that report that we may want to accelerate on the grid here, or add some other new items to it. But we feel that this is pretty comprehensive of what our needs are 5 years from now.
The Fletcher Thompson study covers what? All the buildings and the
Yes.
fields? Okay.
All the buildings.
Just the buildings?
Right. They are giving us some cost estimates. Jack, correct me if I missay this, but some cost estimates on the turf field as well.
Supposed to.
I mean, they won't, those cost estimates would not be good enough to go forward to a referendum with, though. But they would be for our planning to kind of ballpark what this thing is going to look like.
Yeah, less or more.
Right.
Now, Jim, you said that the company that's working with Fletcher Thomas, that's doing the enrollment study, is going to be done with that around the end of December?
Yeah.
We going to see that around that time, or is it going to be more of a package thing later on?
I expect that it's going to be a package thing in January. I just yesterday got some correspondence from Mullane and McBroom, is the company that's doing it. They're a great company. I really enjoy working with them. They're being held up a little bit at the state level, and I had to actually spend an hour today in a training session because you have to be trained on the ethical use of data before the state releases some of the, the birth rate data and things like that to the company. So as the receiving institution, I had to take the training and get a certificate of completion. That had to now be mailed up to the state. We faxed it and emailed it and hard copied it to try to get the data. The state has agreed to expedite the request, but we could have a little glitchy thing for an extra week or two because of that.
I have a question on the Monroe oil tank. Does it really make sense now that gas is there to replace that in 2 years? Once you start digging, you're going to find that it's leaking, you're going to have all sorts of other costs. Why wouldn't you just take it out and be done?
Yeah, I'll let Jack speak to that. You might want to grab a mic, Jack, so that the audience
It's in the ground.
at home could hear it.
It is in the ground.
Yeah, with all the tanks, as you know, we're mandated to have them removed within a certain period of time. So the tanks that you see listed are to make sure that we get them removed within the time requirement. The other piece, as was mentioned last night, is by having the oil tank there, we have some flexibility in terms of going gas or oil, depending on what the markets do in either one of the energies.
But we'd have to recapture that $80,000 on the cost difference from oil to gas.
Right, over the life of the tank, which is 25 years.
The tank is, it's a double...
I believe this is a fiberglass tank.
I was going to say, it's a
that we have
double-walled
in there.
fiberglass tank, and there's actually monthly UST testing as per the DEP, and so far we're okay.
The one that's currently in the ground.
That's currently in the ground.
Right.
We have to do testing on all of our underground storage tanks, and they're all, again, they're tested monthly by an outside vendor that is licensed by DEP. We also have daily tests that our custodians have to do based on, to see how much oil is actually in them, and they keep a log. So as of right now, we don't know of any leaks.
Right.
It's not to say
We just had
change.
calibration done this week, as a matter of fact, on the pneumicators, which measure the height of the oil at any point in time.
But it still makes sense to replace this tank and not just stick with the gas?
Again, it's
Is
a
it a good
hedge.
use? Is it the best use of the $80,000?
It's a hedge. Like with any of these energies, it's a hedge. You're trying to predict the future. Who would have known 2 years ago natural gas would have gone up as much as it has? I mean, nobody can predict, but in that hedge, if you're locked into one energy, you don't have any
It's
choices.
like being stuck with a bus company. It's the same thing, basically. I mean, it's worth it to spend the $80,000 for 25 years. You're going to save a lot more than $80,000 over a 25-year span. That's the way. I mean, that's the way I would look at it, personally. I mean,
they're in the
It's
ground
a-
for 25 years.
yeah. So you're rolling the
So-
dice that you're going to
So
save
we
more
would
than
still
80.
put an underground one in? We
We
wouldn't
have
put it
to.
above
We
the
have
ground?
to.
based
We
on
don't
the
have a
size.
choice.
Can't.
Yeah.
Right.
Based on the size of
But they're
vessel.
not, the oil tanks that were put in the ground 30, 40 years ago, they're made more out of fiberglass and,
Right.
safer and,
Better monitoring systems.
yeah.
Double walled.
Yeah, the monitoring system actually tells within 1/10 of an inch the level of the oil at any given point in time. It gives you historical data as well, and that way, if there's a change in level at any point, you know something's going on. So we do have some good systems in place to know at any point the condition of the tank, in addition to the
And
other
that's exactly
inspections.
why our custodians stick the tanks every day. Okay, every day they go out and they have a measuring stick that's about 12 feet long, and they go down and actually dipstick the oil tanks, because if you saw a big fluctuation, it would tell you, uh-oh, oil's leaking somewhere, or somebody left a lot of windows open last night and the boilers were going like crazy. So.
Can I ask a question related to that? Back to, the energy use and the oil and the gas, and, well, actually, this probably also goes to electricity, too. We were talking about the increase in terms of the rates, and you demonstrated really well with that one slide about the rates. But when you were using that slide, you did 3-year averages and used that. With Honeywell, weren't we supposed to see a decrease in usage? So wouldn't we be budgeting for a decrease off of the 3-year average?
We actually did, Amy. And that's a great question, because we actually did see a decrease in usage since the Honeywell project, and the 3-year average absorbs that, okay, into it. And so is there a little inflation perhaps in that? And I would say yes. The answer is yes to that. The problem is that I still would rather stick with a 3-year average in the projection, because we don't know what kind of winters we're going to have. Are they going to be excessively cold or excessively warm? There has to be, I can't with all honesty say that last winter's usage is a good indicator of next year's usage. I'd rather have the 3-year average for that.
And additionally, the Honeywell project wasn't officially commissioned. I believe the date was March 1st, February 15th. So we're technically not even a full year into the project. So I think that would also make us a little leery. If you recall, they started with the lighting in Massac in May of 2013, and they really didn't finish all the buildings with, weather stripping and air tightening and doors and everything until in the fall. And then everything was really the calibration and getting things so that our head custodians could see, heat readings and make sure that they could actually control the building systems.
And when it got commissioned, basically the term to use for that is when it got commissioned, when everybody was trained in how to use the devices. And
so there just isn't a lot of data yet to work from.
That's correct.
Okay.
But there is a decrease. We see a decrease last year.
How does it, we talked about on Monday the lease payment, 400-something thousand, right?
Right.
So how is that tracked against the savings? What's the correlation? Is it a direct correlation year over year?
The lease payment, the 400,000 is two components. There's $100,000 on an annual basis that is going to CLMP over the course of 4 years, which was their interest-free loan to us for the expected savings. I believe it was called a Pura grant, if I'm not mistaken. The other piece of that, the $305,000 over 10 years, is back to the town to pay the town back for the tax-exempt loan that was taken out by the town from Bank of America. The actual tracking of the savings is done by Honeywell. They have a separate, call it an accounting office, that specifically tracks. So basically on a quarterly basis, my department sends them a spreadsheet which shows them all the electricity. It basically breaks out all of our bills, and it tells them how many kilowatts we used, what our delivery charges to CLMP by meter. So every building has multiple electricity meters, so that's what they track. And that includes like the light poles out on the parking lot here at all the buildings. So that's how we track that.
And as per the contract, they have to meet the energy benchmarks, so they have to show savings in our total usage.
Well, in the usage.
Right,
usage, not in the
usage.
supply cost.
Right.
Well, because the costs fluctuate, right?
Right.
You're saying that it's tracked over a industry benchmark, not over a previous average that we were incurring in terms of usage prior to the upgrades?
No, they
No.
did a full engineering
No.
study on everything we had
It's our, it's
and
it's
used that
strictly our
information.
usage, it's not an
Right.
industry.
Okay.
When they originally designed the project, they would have used industry standards, but when it comes to our specific savings, they had done an engineering study in the summer of 2012. They pretty much intensively called around all our buildings, all our mechanicals. They were
Got
they were
all of
pretty
our
much into
bills,
everything.
got all of our
Yeah,
oil.
they had all our bills. I've had, I mean, if anybody would like scanned copies of stuff, we have them. So they basically really dug through everything with a fine-tooth comb and came up with what they thought our savings could be. And then in all the negotiations between the Board of Finance and Honeywell, they came up with, you know, how this project was going to be a net zero cost effectively to the town.
Okay.
One thing it did not do, unfortunately, was control the actual cost or the price of electricity. That they wouldn't guarantee.
Who do we purchase our electricity from?
We are currently using Constellation, which is a third party. We actually belong to a consortium for electricity purchasing. We don't buy it from CLMP. CLMP we pay delivery to.
Right.
We are actually, that contract expires in December, and I believe I just have to remember, but I'm pretty sure we're back with Constellation. It's either Constellation or is
So
the
the
supplier.
consortium already has decided that this huge increase is still the same company we're going to?
It actually gets bid out amongst various suppliers. I can't remember who all the suppliers are, but there were about 4 suppliers that would bid on it. Electricity prices significantly increased probably in late January is when they started to really go up, and they just sort of kind of went through the roof since then. They've sort of stabilized, but they're still really high.
So every other town or district in our consortium is going to experience the same huge increase in electricity this year, whoever.
Yeah, unless someone out there is able to generate their own electricity, and I think there's one town in Connecticut that does that, and I'm not quite sure how they do it, but yeah, everybody, sorry?
2, South Norwalk and Wallingford.
I was gonna say Wallingford is the one that I know of. I'm not sure about South Norwalk, but yeah, so everybody's in for a period of increased pricing.
I saw a budget in another town that was estimating a 15% increase in electricity, and I shook my head and said, oh, I think they might be underestimating it. So
So I've brought this up many times before. I'll just say the same thing, like Kay says every year. A lot of schools have solar, but we don't. And I keep hearing roof loads. Well, I just don't understand how all these other schools have solar and we don't have solar. So can we chat about that?
Just had a conversation about this yesterday. It's something we will look into. We'll see what's available. I mean, it continues to change in terms of what's available. Yeah, there are factors we have to consider. The roof is one of the things, who's going to, if we hire a contractor, if we have an agreement with a contractor to put panels on, we have to have an agreement that they won't continue to honor the warranty of our roof or roofs. So those are things we'll have to navigate. And then the other part we'll have to navigate too is it will have impact on the Honeywell contract. So those are some things we'll have to work through, but it is something we'll investigate.
And the difficulty, in my experience in looking into solar in the past, has been at this latitude, payback is a very long time for the investment in the materials and the construction and that, unless there are substantial federal or state grants out there to reduce the cost of the thing in the first place. And there have not been good grants out there for solar as of late. So, I mean, I investigated it for my own house, and the payback was way too long for the kind of money that I would have needed to shell out. So I chose not to do that.
They actually looked at something, a solar thermal cover for the pool here at Massac as part of the Honeywell project, and it was thrown out because the payback was so long.
And actually, the very first Honeywell proposal did have some photovoltaic panels too. Those were removed again. The payback at that time couldn't justify it.
This is just 2 years ago, so.
Good suggestion, Mark, yes.
All right, let George go.
George?
Okay. Tractor loader, that's in the operating budget?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the other two items, one is coming out of the Honeywell Phase 2. We would have to go to referendum on the field, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now for 2016-17, just so I'm clear on how those items are handled, is that something where some of that would be in operating, some of it would come at a referendum? Would we go for one bag for all these items?
I mean, we would probably, I mean, the roof replacement obviously is a referendum.
Right.
Okay, that's a town referendum. I'm not sure about the oil tank replacement. I'm not sure if we could, if that could be done in installments over a 1 or 2 year, 3 year period or not. But the other two items for sure would be, could be out of the operating budget.
Okay.
The oil tank doesn't meet the threshold, though, for a referendum, because we're at 150.
No, I was talking about some kind of like a lease agreement where we, paid in a 2 year payout or something like that.
I was just curious because, I mean, you could take the tack to put in each of these items into the operating budget, or you could bundle them together, because we've done that in the past, and go to referendum for a bundle of items.
Mark?
Can you fill me in a little more on the Jockey Hollow new roof access stairs before I make any assumptions?
Jack is closer to that than I am, so.
Yeah, there are multiple issues with the stairs there. There is no way to, there's no good way to have access to the roof, especially for servicing the equipment.
Is it the one hatch that's when you go in and to the
Yeah,
right
and it's
you just go up that
extremely
small
tight.
one?
It's got OSHA issues, serviceability issues. The other part is because there's not an easy way to get equipment there or parts to it, there are additional costs when we do servicing. So it presents a range of issues in its current state.
So are you proposing like a 48-inch steel outdoor?
It would require some engineering study, is what it would require.
Caging, so that people can't get up there, et cetera.
Yeah. Again, and for the OSHA compliance as well.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff?
Going back to the tractor and loader, and as well as the replacement of the truck in 2016, when we buy stuff like tractors and loaders, do we just go to a dealer? How does that work? Or could we find someone to find something that's coming off lease and maybe buy something that depreciated a little bit so we're not paying on the high side for it?
The trucks Gabby can speak to in the past. The tractor, what we're envisioning with that is we have a number of people on staff who are tractor owners and have knowledge of tractors. What we're considering at this point, what we'd like to do is we'd like to get something that's sizable, because part of the issue that we currently have is the machine that we own is not tall enough to load. To load salt into the truck. It's not the safest situation. Our guys literally have to get into the bucket to shovel the bucket out to get it into the hoppers for the salt delivery. I mean, it's not safe. Yeah, not good. And it's the only means that we have when it's our machine. When the town gives us their machine midwinter, it's better. Mm-hmm. But their machines are up and down as well. So this, what we'd like to do at this point is we'd like to get something that doesn't, we're not going to put a ton of hours on it. So something used where we're going to get more for the money. Tractors are fairly simple machines, and we have good guys on staff to service it, and we could handle a lot of in-house work, which would also save us money over time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of places that deal with, repos and foreclosures of farms, and they have their equipment. I mean, I'm thinking the same thing for the 550.
The only trick with plow trucks...
as long as it's not a plow truck.
Yeah.
As long as it's not a plow truck. If it never had a sander, a salter, and a plow in it, then I'd say, let's look into buying something that's a year or two old, instead of buying, the brand new one.
Trucks, it gets a little more...
depending on where it came from and what it was used for.
Right.
There's nothing on the state bid list? You would think there is.
I believe so. And
everything else is.
We've used the state bid list. It varies. It really varies what we're looking for. In the terms of the 550, it's one of the for lack of a better term, it's the workhorse for the district. It's our largest plow truck. I mean, we maintain and we plow all of our lots. We still plow Chalk Hill, we plow the driveways. We don't really get any help from the town or Parks and Rec. So if we have a storm, we have to have a reliable, safe truck that, our guys can drive. And I think that, yes, we can always look at something that comes off a lease. But again, you're talking about something that's relatively specialized, and what we've found in just, looking around is that dealers tend to package everything, and usually when you get the package, you end up saving a bit of money.
Yeah, with the plow and the sander.
Right, because they'll package it they'll package it with a plow package, with the sander, with the plow, with all the fittings. We also need to make sure we're able to service it locally. We don't want to have to drive to, northeastern Connecticut to service it. We'd rather service it somewhere close by and somewhere locally. So there's a whole bunch of little factors that we have to take into account when we look at it.
Okay, thank you.
This is all good food for thought.
I have one more. On the tractor loader, what percentage of the year is it used? Is it used all year?
Well, here's the nice thing about that acquisition for us is that it would help us in a number of ways. During the summer months, it gets used for things like bringing the clay out to the fields for softball, when we have to move topsoil, which is frequently. So it would get used for aerators. They would have a 3-point hitch, so we'd have other attachments we could use it for grounds maintenance. And then in the winter, in addition to loading salt onto the trucks, it could potentially save us money with loader time. When we get into these big storms and we have to subcontract out for loaders coming in, it is very expensive. So if we've got something that's bigger and we can use it ourselves and we have guys trained to run it already, potentially this thing could be net positive for us over time. Because tractors also, they're around for a long time. Unlike trucks, service trucks, they're disposable. Tractors, you see them for decades. If it's a good machine, it's going to be around for a long time.
I mean, the tractor we have now, which is a smaller one, we purchased it in the winter of 2011. Before that, the tractor we had was probably around for about 20 years. And it finally just died.
So this tractor would be traded in, we'd capitalize on that and upgrade.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can get it certified.
I'm good.
I need drugs.
We could, we have a tentative date of December 8th, if you want to have more discussion in a special meeting, or we could try to keep the second December meeting agenda a little skinny and have discussions at that meeting on the budget. We'll know more at that time about, you remember the two big unknowns were the phone system and the copier. We'll have that information to share with you by that time, hopefully, right, Jack?
Yeah, we're getting, the phone system is pretty much done. The copier, we're getting really close. I got another phone conference with copier vendor tomorrow.
And then any other data that we can gather, that may come our way about savings, we can do it the December 15th meeting. It's up to you.
Lee?
Option 2.
I'm good with skinny.
I just had a question that I asked last year of Jack, and I want to ask it again.
Sure.
Particularly in light of some of these test scores that are very distressing to me. Are there some new technology initiatives that you did not put in the budget but might be on a wish list that would be something for us to consider?
When we looked at the technology, but what we have in the budget is we have a good plan to replace the aging devices that we have in the fleet. Is what we have in there, is it going to replace everything? No, but it makes a huge leap. One of the things that's going to help us in this coming year is the Munis line that included. There's going to be a percentage of that's going to be we're going to be able to shift to equipment, which hasn't happened for a couple of years. So we're going to see a much bigger change in the number of new devices coming into the school, which is going to be a really big help to us next year.
So Lee, if you flip to page 5.1 and you went to line 754430, rental or lease of computers, it's a budget of $219,000. that line includes the line that we built into the budget a few years ago for $200,000 for computers. Right now, about $110,000 of that is being used to pay off the Munis implementation. So that's going to drop. There's a $30,000 fee that we're paying back to the town for software purchases.
3 years ago.
Sorry.
Was it teacher laptops?
Laptops
Yeah.
that were purchased over the summer. It's $30,000 for 15, 16, $30,000 for 16, 17, but the rest of that's really allocated towards hardware purchases for technology.
If you remember, when we built that line item in to the $200,000, the idea in mind at the time was that we had some immediate needs with Munis and some other things, and that once we paid those off, that we would have a running $200,000 line item to get a cycle going of replacement of computers and the technology. And so next year, that's actually starting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that was the fix for perpetuating and continually upgrading what we could along the way.
Well, I mean, John referenced tonight the answer to the science labs. And the science labs, they like more technology.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up. The interesting thing with the science labs is that right now they have a series of probe software that connects to PC laptops that they have. Jim and I met this year to look at some other alternatives. Where could we go? It's one of the few spots where we can't use Chromebooks right now. So as we looked into it further, one of the things that the company is doing that makes all these probes is they're now going cloud-based. It's not going to be local machines. They're going to make these things so that the software lives out on somebody's servers and it can run on other devices like Chromebooks. So the only trick is it's not out yet. It will be coming out, but it is a ways down the road. So we're in a bit of a transition period. I think what you'll end up seeing is in next year's budget, you'll end up seeing a full refresh in science at that point.
Okay. The other comment I want to make or question I want to ask is we recently saw the test scores, and we've addressed the SAT scores a bit tonight. There were some other scores that did not reflect us being in even the upper portion of our DIRD. And there's pockets, I think.
Which ones are you referring to, Lee? Because that's not our impression.
Well, there's some concerns at Jockey Hollow.
Well, the CAP scores in Jockey Hollow.
CMT scores.
The CMT.
So my question is, in this budget, do we really have enough built in to address all of those test score concerns?
I mean, we had a lengthy conversation about professional development, because the way these things are going to improve and kids' performance is going to improve, and not just on the test scores, because we know that's just a snapshot, but overall performance is by the initiatives that we put into the classroom. So I'm really happy and pleased that we're still able to do the summer institutes that train. Now this is the 4th year, so we've trained over 80 teachers in inquiry-based and BYOT. That's the direction we have to go. By you guys developing a mission statement that talked about inquiry, that talked about those kind of innovative ideas, it's allowed us to plan our professional development that deals with inquiry-based education, the STEM kinds of education, and BYOT. So I was really happy that professional development wasn't cut this year. Because over the last couple of years, we've put some money in professional development. Jim has made a commitment for the summer institutes and all the Monroe institutes that happen after school, and it wasn't cut this year. I was a little nervous about that when we sat down, because every year we look at that. But it isn't cut, so I really believe that there's money in there to continue the initiatives that we started, the BYOT, the inquiry-based, the technology, and that we're going to see. We see every year good things happening, and that we're just going to continue that, and more people will be trained, and we'll be able to meet their needs. That's what I believe.
And I just want to go back to the testing thing for a second. We fully acknowledge the SAT scores were probably the weakest link in the assessment presentation that we had, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that we had 2 schools of distinction, and Jockey Hollow was identified as a school of excellence. So I'm just not sure where that sense is that the scores are in bad shape.
And the science CMTs in 5th were up to the top of the DERG. 8th, it did go down more toward the bottom of the DERG, but still not really low. And then 10th, we were back up to the top of the DERG again. And certainly our AP, we're really pleased with our AP, how that's working out. And we believe that the push has been AP over the last several years, getting that into the classrooms, getting it into the curriculum, and that's what we're going to see happening with the SATs, once we find out what the new SATs are looking for.
Well, I just want to make sure we've got enough built into this budget to address those
If I
concerns.
remember from the meeting that you presented the scores, the plan was to develop a plan, particularly for the SATs. And I'm sure that's probably not quite ready for publishment yet.
And that's not ready. We're meeting all the time. One of the things, again, we're really waiting to see what these new SATs are going to look like.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily a money thing, right?
Not necessarily. I think, though, if we need new technology or we need something else, that'll come back. That'll be part of the plan. But I think it's more aligning what we're doing in the classroom every day so that when the kids come to that test, it's not something new and something different. It's something that they've been doing, and they'll just be able to continue to go through.
Yeah, I think we need to see the plan for the plan on that. Alan?
You had a question about the $50,000 contingency for special ed costs. You recommended that last year. How did it work?
Kay, did we
Was
have
it
to
enough?
access that? I don't, or Gabby, I mean, we're still in the year.
Still in the year, but,
So it's hard to guess at,
well, I
but
mean, given that if you look at where our excess cost estimate was for this current budget year, which was $660,000, and we're estimating, based on our actual numbers this year, we're estimating $950,000. At some point, we're probably going to access that, more than likely for tuition, which is where it was placed. We just, we have to pay out over $1 million before we even get any money back from the state. So, and we didn't budget for paying out over $1 million. So we will be accessing that $100,000.
Jim, back to your original question, I think that probably on our next board meeting, we ought to have you give us a general update during your superintendent's report.
okay.
And if there's any other questions that the board members have, if you just forward them to Jim, and then he can address them at the next board meeting.
Okay, so I'll have Terry take down the posting for the December 8th meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And just in terms of closing comments, my compliments to the whole administrative staff. These things used to last for, what do we have, 5, 6, 7 of these budget meetings? And there's an awful lot of consternation and gnashing of teeth. So this change to a meeting and a half is just greatly appreciated. Nice
Other than
job.
John not getting the food here on time, I thought this went well.
Next time I'll feed.
So thank you very much. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to item 6. If I'll have a
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.